Welcome, dear listener, to a tranquil space where thoughts can gently unfurl and insights can softly bloom, guiding you towards a restful night. Tonight we embark upon a quiet journey into the mind of a remarkable thinker, Hannah Arendt, whose reflections on human existence and our place in the world offer a profound calm, an invitation to understand ourselves and our communities more deeply. As you settle into your most comfortable place, allowing the day's concerns to gently recede, let your mind become receptive to the quiet wisdom we will uncover together. A wisdom designed to soothe and inspire, leading you towards a state of deep relaxation and peaceful sleep. Our story begins in the distant past, in the vibrant heart of ancient Greece, a time when the very foundations of how we think about life and purpose were being laid. Imagine the bustling marketplace of Athens, the Agora, a place where citizens gathered not just for commerce, but for spirited debate, for shared learning, and for the very fabric of communal life. In this lively setting lived a philosopher whose name still echoes through the centuries, Socrates. He was not one to retreat into solitary contemplation. Instead, his philosophy was alive, breathed into existence through active engagement with his fellow citizens. For Socrates, the true essence of philosophy was found in conversation, in the gentle probing of ideas, in the shared exploration of truth among people. It was an inherently social act, a dance of minds that unfolded in the public square, believing that meaningful understanding could only emerge from the dynamic exchange between individuals. He saw philosophy and political engagement not as separate paths, but as two inseparable strands of a single vibrant tapestry of human experience. This Hannah Arendt would later call the active life, a life lived amongst others, in discourse and shared endeavour. Yet, this path of active engagement was not without its shadows. Socrates, despite his profound contributions, faced accusations that led to his condemnation and eventual death. He was accused of corrupting the youth and denying the gods of the state, charges that culminated in a tragic verdict. In 399 BC, he was forced to drink hemlock, departing this world in a quiet, solemn act. One of his students, a bright and passionate young man named Plato, witnessed this harrowing trial, an event that deeply scarred his soul and profoundly shaped his philosophical trajectory. The injustice of Socrates' execution left an indelible mark on Plato, overwhelmed by sorrow and disillusionment with the political climate in Athens, a city whose citizens, he felt, took foolish pride in their system. Plato chose a different path. He left Athens, embarking on a long journey that by some accounts took him as far as the shores of North Africa. This was not a journey of mere sightseeing, but a profound retreat, a quiet turning away from the public clamor that he felt had betrayed his beloved mentor. When he eventually returned to Athens years later, to establish his famed academy, there was a noticeable shift in his philosophical focus. His gaze had turned inward, towards the serene, abstract realm of ideas. Plato became an advocate for what Hannah Arendt would later describe as the contemplative life. This archetype of the philosopher is one we often imagine a solitary figure, withdrawing from the noisy currents of public life to think deeply, to meditate on abstract concepts in quiet isolation. Picture a sage in a secluded tower, or a scholar immersed in dusty tomes within an academic sanctuary, or even a thoughtful soul by a peaceful pond, lost in the quietude of their own reflections. For Plato, the path to profound thinking, to truly novel insights, lay in this solitary introspection. He believed that the external world, the realm of public opinion and sensory experience, was like the flickering shadows on the wall of a cave, as depicted in his famous allegory. True knowledge, true understanding, could only be reached by emerging from this cave, through a process of philosophical inquiry, to witness the brilliant unchanging light of the sun, which symbolized pure knowledge, the higher forms. This was a deep internal journey, a quiet ascent to intellectual clarity, where the clamor of public discourse was seen as a potential contaminant, an unwelcome distraction from the pursuit of unadulterated truth. So, in the grand sweep of ancient Greek philosophy, we see this distinct fork in the road. On one side, the active life of Socrates, inseparable from the bustling Agora, animated by conversation and public engagement. On the other, the contemplative life of Plato, born from disillusionment, seeking truth in the quiet sanctuary of the mind, a realm of pure ideas. Aristotle, the third of the great triumvirate, would echo Socrates in his belief that political engagement was an integral part of philosophical life, aligning himself more with the active tradition. This fundamental distinction between the active and the contemplative forms a cornerstone of Hannah Arendt's own thought, and it helps us understand the profound shifts she herself underwent. Hannah Arendt, as a young woman in Germany, found herself initially drawn to the contemplative path, much like Plato. Immersed in her philosophical studies, just before the ominous clouds of World War II began to gather, she would undoubtedly have considered herself a philosopher in this traditional sense. She was intellectually engaged, exploring complex ideas within the quiet confines of academia, living a life dedicated to deep thought and reflection. However, as the political events of the time escalated, as the world around her began to crumble under the weight of unimaginable forces, a profound internal shift occurred. She looked at her own contemplative life and began to feel that it was, in a sense, naive, perhaps even an insufficient response to the stark realities unfolding. What good, she began to ponder, was locking oneself away, quietly thinking, when the very foundations of human dignity and freedom were being so violently threatened? It seemed to her that many philosophers of her era were, in a way, sitting on their hands, adhering to this safe contemplative ideal, while the world cried out for something more. What was truly needed, she felt, was not more quiet introspection, but a return to the active life, a life of engaged participation, much like that espoused by Socrates and Aristotle. This realization was so profound that for the rest of her life, Hannah Arendt would consciously resist being labeled a political philosopher. Instead, she preferred to call herself a political theorist. Her rationale was clear. Philosophy, practiced in its traditional contemplative form, had in her view failed to provide anything of genuine tangible value in the real world, because, she argued, it precisely denied a fundamental aspect of being human on this planet, the realm of the political. It denied the very world we inhabit, the shared space where our lives intertwine and our common destiny is forged. To fully grasp Arendt's critique and her vision for a more complete human existence, she invites us to consider three fundamental categories of being, three ways in which we experience and interact with the world. These she calls labor, work, and action. Let us gently explore each of these, one by one, allowing their meanings to softly resonate within us. First, we have labor. This category encompasses all those activities we must undertake daily, simply to sustain our biological existence. These are the fundamental, often cyclical processes without which our bodies would cease to thrive. Think of the rhythm of breathing, the quiet satisfaction of eating nourishing food, the gentle quenching of thirst, the profound necessity of sleep, and all the myriad biological functions that maintain the intricate machinery of our physical selves. These are the activities that tie us directly to our animal nature, to the needs of the body, a continuous engagement with life's most basic requirements. They are repetitive, unending, and essential, a constant ebb and flow that ensures our very survival from one moment to the next. In Arendt's framework, labor anchors us to the earth, to the fundamental cycles of nature. Next, we turn our thoughts to work. Work for Hannah Arendt is the act of producing what she calls cultural artifacts, This term, though academic, simply refers to the things we create that build and furnish our shared world, the enduring objects that provide a stable setting for human life. We all need a place to live, a world to inhabit, and as human beings we are always situated within a culture, within a world shaped by human hands and minds. The work part of being a person is precisely the effort we invest each day to construct and maintain this intricate setting. Imagine the gentle clink of a hammer as a window is installed, framing a view of the world outside. Picture the steady hands that shape a car, providing mobility and connection. Envision the meticulous planning that goes into building a bridge, spanning divides, or a skyscraper, reaching towards the heavens. Consider the quiet dedication of an author, weaving words into a novel that illuminates human experience, or a composer crafting a symphony, filling the air with beauty. Even the simple act of mowing grass, creating a neat and ordered landscape, or designing a pair of sunglasses, shaping our perception of light, falls into this category. These are the activities that produce the tangible, durable objects that constitute our shared world, giving it form and structure. Work creates the permanent physical realm in which our lives unfold, providing a sense of stability and continuity. Finally, we arrive at action. Action, in its simplest and most profound sense, is the realm of the political. It is the spontaneous, free interaction of equal citizens within the public sphere. These are the words we speak, the initiatives we take, the discussions we engage in, the decisions we make together as a community. This is the piece of human life that animated Socrates and Aristotle so deeply, the very heart of what they championed as the active life. It is in this realm that societies are governed, that relationships between human beings and the world are managed, and indeed where the course of history itself is often charted. For Hannah Arendt, this action within the political realm is the very force that imbues our world and the cultural artifacts within it with their profound meaning. Without the realm of the political, she would argue, a building is simply a structure of stone and mortar, a tree merely a biological entity. It is only when free, equal human beings come together in a public forum, through shared discourse and decision, that they collectively decide upon the cultural significance, the identity, the deeper meaning of these things within their shared existence. Action, therefore, is not merely doing, it is the act of being with others, of speaking and being heard, of initiating and responding, thereby creating the very meaning of our collective human world. Let us pause for a moment to fully appreciate the quiet, yet immense significance of this insight. It may seem innocuous on the surface, but beneath its gentle exterior, this perspective contains one of the most penetrating critiques of modernity from the 20th century. If a common lament of our modern age is that it often struggles to provide us with a clear sense of meaning or identity, leading to feelings of relativism or historicism, Arendt suggests a profound root cause. She argues that the intellectual currents of the Enlightenment, while bringing about immense progress, inadvertently made a fundamental mistake. It effectively did away with the authentic realm of the political. To understand how this might have happened, let us gently consider the spirit of the Enlightenment. Think of a quintessential philosopher from that era, for instance, John Locke, whose ideas profoundly shaped our understanding of governance and individual rights. What was the role of the political realm within Locke's philosophy, and indeed within much of Enlightenment thinking? Politics, in this view, became primarily a means to an end. We engage in the political sphere. We establish governments and laws, primarily to secure fundamental rights, such as life, liberty, and property. In essence, politics serves an economic function. It is a tool to safeguard private property rights and foster a stable environment for economic exchange. But this understanding of politics was a radical departure from the ancient world. In the pre-Enlightenment active life of Socrates and Aristotle, politics was not a mere means, it was an end in itself. In fact, the relationship was often reversed. One fulfilled the necessary activities of labor and work, sustaining one's life, engaging in economic pursuits, precisely so that one could then participate fully and freely in the political realm. Economics was seen as a prerequisite, a means to ensure the leisure and resources needed for the truly fulfilling political life, the life of shared deliberation and civic engagement. This shift from politics as an end to politics as a means to an economic end became a hallmark of the Enlightenment. As we explored in earlier moments of reflection, when the ancient idea of final causes, the inherent purposes written into the universe, was slowly set aside, societies sought new ways to ensure cohesion and functionality. The solution proposed by many early Enlightenment thinkers was ingenious. If people could be encouraged to cooperate based on mutually beneficial economic exchange, they would be far less likely to constantly clash over political or moral disputes. Commerce, it was hoped, would pacify and unite. However, Hannah Arendt would gently argue that this approach, while perhaps fostering stability, inadvertently stripped away a vital piece of the human experience. Arguing about political matters, engaging actively in the public realm, is not a disruptive nuisance to be minimized. It is, she believed, a fundamental and deeply enriching aspect of human life. For it is in this very realm that we discover and express who we are. Consider for a moment the question of identity. You could live the contemplative life of traditional philosophy, spending countless hours in quiet solitude, reflecting on the profound question, who am I? But Arendt suggests that this contemplative path, while valuable in its own right, will never, on its own, provide a truly satisfying and complete answer. The answer to who am I, she contends, is only truly arrived at through action, through active engagement in the public realm. Just as our participation in the public sphere imbues our cultural artifacts with meaning, so too does it establish our own unique identities. By taking action in the realm of the political, by speaking our minds, by initiating new ideas, by participating in shared decisions, we stake a claim to our own individual values and solidify our sense of self in the eyes of others and ourselves. This then becomes a crucial point in her gentle critique. If it is a common observation of modernity that many people experience a quiet crisis of identity, a feeling of being unmoored or disconnected, and that the tools of Enlightenment rationalism seem unable to provide clear answers to questions of values without dissolving into relativism or historicism, Arendt offers a compelling explanation. She suggests that this vacuum exists precisely because, since the dawn of the Enlightenment, there has been a systematic exclusion of the political realm, the very form we have historically had for establishing our own personal identity and values. The Enlightenment, in its earnest and often successful attempt to rationalize, to create legalistic systems that operate on mutual rational self-interest, inadvertently subverted the political. It transformed politics from an end in itself, a vibrant space for human flourishing, into a mere means to an economic end. So, let us recall Arendt's three parts of human life: labor, work, and action. What the Enlightenment, in its quiet, gradual unfolding, has essentially done, she argues, is to subtly remove the action part of a person's life altogether. It has, in her words, turned us into economic man. The citizen of modernity, therefore, finds themselves caught in a perpetual loop between labor and work. They are endlessly engaged in maintaining their biological existence and producing the world's artifacts. But the crucial element of public action, where values and identity are truly forged, feels desperately missing. To gently clarify this profound point, consider how often people in our modern world define their place. When you ask someone, "Who are you?" in our contemporary society, a frequent response is to tell you their job. "I am a plumber," or I am an accountant, or I am a teacher. But what does the act of plumbing, or accounting, or teaching truly tell us about the deeper questions of one's values, one's unique identity, one's core being? We often ask our children, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" instead of "Who do you want to be?" There is a quiet, almost imperceptible sense in which the purest form of expression for someone in a post-Enlightenment world has become what they do for a living, constantly cycling between the fields of labor and work, maintaining their biological existence during the evenings, strictly so that they can return to work the next day and engage in whatever, often menial, level of expression their job provides. This, Hannah Arendt quietly observes, is the condition of economic man. Think of other markers of identity in a consumer-driven society. Your sense of self is often subtly defined by what you own, the kind of phone you use, the clothes you wear, the trips you embark upon. Your transactions, your acts of consumption, become the quiet architects of your identity. But Arendt would suggest that this sense of identity provided by modernity is a cheapened, diminished version of what was once available to people. This whole identity, she might say, feels somewhat pixelated, lacking the sharp clarity and profound depth of a truly active, politically engaged self. It's like having pixelated friends on social media, whose connection feels just a little less substantial than real human bonds, or pixelated expressions of approval that lack the genuine warmth of a real thumbs up, or pixelated videos that mediate our entire relationship with reality, creating a subtle distance between us and direct experience. The values that emerged from the Enlightenment, she gently implies, inadvertently paved the way for a world where people are fundamentally seen as cogs in an economic machine, rather than as vibrant, active participants in their communities. Modern politics, in this diminished sense, often consists of passively turning on the television, allowing a curated picture of world events to be spoon-fed to us, and then perhaps taking to the digital streets of social media, screaming into the void of online discourse. This, Arendt would suggest, is a far cry from authentic political action. This subversion of people's ability to truly participate in politics, she argues, began its quiet work in the Enlightenment. The robust civic republicanism that once animated many ancient cultures, where citizens actively engaged in something like the Greek polis, has been replaced in modernity by the passive act of writing a letter to one's representative, or, if one becomes truly impassioned, making a sign and waving it around in traffic. It is precisely from this vantage point that we can begin to understand the profound insights contained within one of her most famous works, The Origins of Totalitarianism. As the title subtly suggests, this period in Hannah Arendt's intellectual life was dedicated to a deep, searching gaze at the political landscape around her, particularly during and after World War II. She observed the terrifying rise of new forms of totalitarianism, and her inquiry was driven by two deeply unsettling questions. Firstly, how did these systems manage to ascend to power in the first place? And secondly, once in power, how did they manage to maintain their grip, despite perpetrating unspeakable acts against their own citizens? The quiet, yet disturbing, answer to these questions, she believed, begins with modernity's systematic exclusion of the political realm. It is, she would contend, no mere coincidence that when we examine the structure of 20th century totalitarian regimes, free political discourse among equal citizens is never, not even remotely, one of their priorities. In fact, the opposite is true. Political dissenters often mysteriously disappear, or are brutally silenced. Events like the infamous Night of the Long Knives serve as stark reminders of this chilling reality. The ultimate unspoken goal of these regimes is to transform entire populations into what she hauntingly calls an animal laborans, a term she skillfully repurposes from Marx. Marx, in his own time, was grappling with a fundamental question, particularly relevant in an era when Charles Darwin's work was also revolutionizing our understanding of life. What truly separates human beings from all other animals in the kingdom of life? Many at the time loved to answer that question by pointing to our superior capacity for thought, our intellectual prowess. But Marx, with his concept of the animal laborans, suggested a different distinction. He argued that while our brains are certainly different, what fundamentally sets us apart is not so much our ability to think better, but the roles we play within societies as laborers. In essence, we labor more effectively, more productively than other animals. However, for all of Karl Marx's earnest attempts to free people from what he perceived as the chains of capitalism, from the alienation of the self caused by economic systems, Hannah Arendt gently suggests that even if he succeeded in removing those capitalist chains, he still left the citizens of modernity, in the rest of his thinking, bound by the chains of the entire economic task set forth by the Enlightenment. She takes the term animal laborans and reconfigures it, not to celebrate human labor, but to quietly underscore what she sees as a profound flaw in Marxist thought, and by extension, in modernity itself. She writes, in a passage that resonates with quiet power, a mass society of laborers such as Marx had in mind, when he spoke of socialized mankind, consists of worldless specimens of the species mankind, whether they are household slaves, driven into their predicament by the violence of others, or free performing their functions willingly. What she is subtly conveying here is that when you are a person living in modernity, and the primary function of your life is reduced to fulfilling some sort of economic role, when your existence is confined primarily to the categories of work and labor, and the vibrant action of the political realm is taken out of the equation, you are left feeling like what she terms a worldless specimen. The common critique of the Enlightenment, that it alienates the self, leading to a sense of individual detachment, Arendt believes does not go far enough. This, she argues, is not merely self-alienation. It is a deeper, more pervasive condition she calls world alienation. By subtly subverting the political, the Enlightenment has produced a world where we can no longer actively imbue our cultural artifacts, and indeed our very world, with meaning through shared public discourse. What we are left with, she thinks, are mass societies of laborers who feel a constant, often quiet, and profound disconnection from the world they inhabit. She further elaborates in her profound work, The Human Condition, stating, "This worldlessness of the animal laborans, to be sure, is entirely different from the active flight from the publicity of the world which we found inherent in the activity of good works. The animal laborans does not flee the world, but is ejected from it insofar as he is imprisoned in the privacy of his own body, caught in the fulfillment of needs in which nobody can share and which nobody can fully communicate." What she is gently suggesting here is that modernity has created a world where there is no longer a truly authentic public realm for people to engage in. Instead, we find ourselves increasingly imprisoned in our own private lives of labor and work. In this quiet confinement, we become alienated from the public world, losing our sense of belonging and shared purpose. Through a long, gradual process that she calls the emancipation of labor, unfolding over hundreds of years, we have subtly convinced the citizens of modernity that the action portion of their lives, the part where they once derived a profound sense of identity and meaning, is now to be found primarily through their jobs, or through how they contribute to the overarching public economy. We have, in a sense, traded a vibrant public realm of political engagement for a sprawling public economy, and in doing so, we have mistakenly concluded that these two realms are capable of providing the same depth of meaning and connection for people. But Arendt would gently insist that we no longer possess a true public realm. Instead, what we often witness are private acts out in the open, carried out by a mass society of laborers who perceive themselves primarily in terms of the role they play within an economic system. And when this happens, she observes, it inevitably leads to a quiet, yet pervasive, outcome. The outcome is what is euphemistically called mass culture, and its deep-rooted trouble is a universal unhappiness, due on one side to the troubled balance between laboring and consumption, and on the other to the persistent demands of the animal laborers to obtain a happiness which can be achieved only where life's processes of exhaustion and regeneration, of pain and release from pain, strike a perfect balance. This gentle yet poignant description paints a picture of the average citizen of modernity, a worldless, alienated economic cog, immersed in a culture that they feel no real power or recourse to change. This, she believes, is the type of rootless person who in large numbers becomes susceptible to the allure of totalitarianism. People live their lives in a state of quiet malaise, silently starving for a sense of identity or meaning that transcends what they do for a living, or how that contributes to a global economy. And it is precisely at this vulnerable juncture, perhaps after a period of profound disillusionment, like the aftermath of the Treaty of Versailles, that a political group can emerge, offering people something seemingly meaningful to be a part of. This, she warns, is the quiet horror that modernity can unwittingly produce, a society of economic cogs, lacking a true political voice, yet desperately yearning for a cause, for something to move them, and a political group with often insidious intentions, ready to pull the levers of this silent machine. Following the immense tragedy of World War II, Hannah Arendt, like so many others, embarked on a profound search for understanding. She sought to grasp the full measure of what had transpired in Germany, to comprehend how something as monstrous as the Third Reich could have possibly arisen. Her inquiries focused on two central questions. How did such a totalitarian regime ascend to power in the first place? And once in power, how did it manage to sustain itself, maintaining control over its populace despite its horrific actions? A common explanation offered by commentators of her time was that the events in Germany were an historical anomaly, a unique confluence of circumstances. It was often suggested that a cabal of the most evil individuals imaginable had somehow coalesced, co-opted the National Socialist Party, and then meticulously executed their malevolent plan for world domination. This narrative often depicted a vindictive German populace, still smarting from the indignities of World War I, disproportionately filled with soldiers eager to commit unspeakable acts against innocent people. The Third Reich, in this view, was essentially an evil death cult that through some perfect alignment of dark events was able to carry out its horrific agenda. Hannah Arendt, however, took an extremely controversial yet quietly profound position. She respectfully disagreed with this common synopsis. First, she would gently suggest, let us not grant the Nazis credit where it isn't due. The Third Reich was not the result of some evil genius formulating a perfectly intricate and flawlessly executed plan. What happened in Germany, she argued, could be far more chillingly explained by the very situation that modernity itself had created in the world. There is perhaps no more direct and unsettling example of this than the scene she describes in her seminal work, Eichmann in Jerusalem. Shortly after World War II, many Nazis were brought to trial for their horrific war crimes. One such individual was a man named Adolf Eichmann. Eichmann's primary role during the war was largely administrative. He operated from behind a desk. His work has often been described chillingly as that of a desk murderer, for he would sit and review names and numbers on pieces of paper, then issue orders that sent countless individuals to Auschwitz, to other prisons, or to various dreadful fates, where they would often perish. When Adolf Eichmann was finally brought to trial, he was presented to the public within a glass booth, a stark visual representation of his isolation and the severity of his crimes. People who came to witness his testimony were, naturally, expecting to behold evil incarnate, a demonic figure encased in glass, defiantly justifying his horrific actions for the Nazi regime, to his very last breath. But what they actually encountered from Hannah Arendt's perceptive viewpoint was something far more terrifying than a cartoonish villain. What they saw was what appeared to be an utterly ordinary man. He was not an evil genius. In fact, as far as Arendt could discern, he was not even particularly intelligent. He often spoke in tired clichés, lacked originality, showed no wit and possessed no charismatic presence. More disturbingly, he seemed utterly devoid of hate towards the very people he was sending to their deaths. The most frightening aspect of Adolf Eichmann's trial was the quiet, chilling realization that these unthinkable crimes against innocent people were committed by someone who appeared to be an average, unremarkable individual, simply following orders. This was not a man driven by a fervent racist ideology. This was a man, Arendt concluded, motivated primarily by the mundane desire for a promotion, by the simple ambition to advance within the system. This profoundly unsettling observation led Hannah Arendt to coin a concept that would forever change our understanding of evil: the banality of evil. When an evil act is committed, it is, in her view, rarely carried out by some dastardly villain with overtly malicious intentions, twirling a symbolic mustache like a caricature. True evil, she suggests, can be carried out by ordinary, non-hateful people who are simply doing their jobs or quietly abiding by the laws of their country, without questioning, without critical thought. All that it takes for Hannah Arendt, for someone to transition from an average citizen to a willing instrument of an evil regime, is a subtle, almost imperceptible shift. That transformation occurs when people decide to stop thinking for themselves, when they quietly relinquish their responsibility to form their own identity and values, and instead passively accept them from some other group that is readily distributing them. The systematic subversion of the political realm, our quiet inability to forge our own individual identity and values through active engagement, has, she argues, created a world where this very transference of responsibility becomes a much easier path to fall into. When investigators looked into the past of Adolf Eichmann, they did not discover a long list of evil causes he had passionately supported, or a relentless personal quest to find legal avenues for murder. What they found instead was a long history of him being what they termed a joiner, someone who throughout his life had quietly joined group after group, seeking external validation, seeking someone else to tell him who he should be and what he should believe. He himself articulated this profound quietness of spirit at his trial, stating, "I sensed I would have to live a leaderless and difficult individual life. I would receive no directives from anybody. No orders and commands would any longer be issued to me. No pertinent ordinances would be there to consult. In brief, a life never known before lay ahead of me." To Hannah Arendt, this was not the voice of an evil genius. This was the quiet confession of a man who consciously chose the path of not thinking, who preferred the comfort of directives over the daunting responsibility of self-direction. This, she believed, explained how a German population, not necessarily filled with overt hatred towards any particular group, could collectively carry out the kinds of atrocities they did. Hannah Arendt would emphasize that when we seek an answer to our first question, how totalitarian regimes ascend to power, it is absolutely crucial that we understand a quiet, yet deeply disturbing truth. The Nazis did not seize power in Germany. They were in fact elected. They came to power because a worldless, alienated population of economic cogs, desperately yearning for something meaningful to move them. Devoid of a vibrant political realm where they could establish their own values through shared action, were offered a compelling cause, an identity to embrace. This, she concludes, is the chilling banality of evil as it truly manifests itself in the world, not in dramatic, overt displays of malice, but in the quiet, unthinking compliance of ordinary people. This brings us to a crucial moment to underscore just how profoundly important the realm of the political is for Hannah Arendt, and for our own sense of peace and meaning, because when it comes to answering her second question, how regimes maintain power once they acquire it, modernity's exclusion of the political realm and the active life of the individual plays an equally significant role. Totalitarianism, by its very nature, requires a unified, homogeneous, simple message to ever get off the ground. It cannot tolerate complexity, diversity, or individual thought. Because of this, the ultimate goal of totalitarianism is always to gently yet firmly lump the entire population into one giant, unified, terrified voice that utterly lacks diversity. This is precisely why such regimes consistently disallow for political dissent, why they fiercely resist the idea of equal citizens engaging in open, free forms of discussion. Hannah Arendt would quietly assert that the ultimate enemy of totalitarianism is plurality, the beautiful, vibrant chorus of multiple voices and diverse perspectives. The political realm, as she envisioned it, is the only space where such a rich plurality of voices can be truly heard, where differences can be acknowledged, debated, and woven into a stronger collective fabric. Totalitarianism, she explains, can only subsist by reducing people to what she calls a bundle of reflexes. What she means by this is that when people are systematically dehumanized by their lack of a political voice, and are kept in a constant state of quiet unease due to the subtle or overt threat of violence from the group in power, they cease to be thinking, acting individuals. They become mere reactors, responding to external stimuli, rather than initiating their own thoughts or actions. Hannah Arendt calls this insidious process systemic terrorism, and the most frightening aspect about it is that in so many quiet ways, it profoundly resembles what one might expect to see if Enlightenment philosophy, with its emphasis on rational self-interest and minimizing political dispute, were allowed to play out to its logical, unchecked endgame. To not be engaged in the active life, to withdraw from the political realm, is for Hannah Arendt a profound mistake. Yet, she would want us to understand that not living the active life can manifest in many different forms. One might surrender one's responsibility to think, quietly falling into an identity handed out by someone else, making the same fundamental mistake as people like Adolf Eichmann. But one could also just as easily become an accessory to evil being carried out in the world simply by sitting around, thinking about abstract concepts all day, as so many traditional philosophers have done in the past. This is precisely why she chose not to be thought of as a political philosopher. She observed that so many philosophers, through their own example, had led lives characterized by sitting quietly in academic institutions, theorizing about abstract concepts, yet never truly taking action on anything in the tangible world. She would want us to gently realize that this contemplative lifestyle, while seemingly innocuous and safe, has very real, albeit often quiet, consequences in the world. You cannot innocently and benignly theorize about things in your solitary tower and simply expect things to end there, neatly contained. The quiet, sad reality of living an exclusively contemplative life is that this passive, inactive approach almost always leads, inevitably, to your profound ideas being misinterpreted, misappropriated, and then used by others who are actively engaged in the world, albeit sometimes for malevolent purposes. Philosophy and politics, Arendt believed, will always be intimately connected to each other, like two threads woven into the same tapestry. To deny that fundamental connection is to be willfully complacent, to choose to sit in your tower alone where it feels safe. Safe, at least for now, she would quietly warn. Friedrich Nietzsche, a powerful and influential thinker, serves as a poignant example of someone whose profound work was tragically misinterpreted, misappropriated, and then twisted into a philosophical justification for the horrors of the Third Reich. Hannah Arendt would want us to gently understand that when you choose to resign yourself from public life, you are simultaneously resigning yourself from the very process of determining the cultural significance of things, the meaning of the world itself. And if you are a philosopher, that includes every piece of philosophy, every insight, every word that you will ever write down. Because if there is one quiet yet utterly crucial lesson that the concept of the banality of evil can show us, it is this: it only takes an absence of active equal citizens, genuinely engaged in the public realm, for totalitarianism to quietly, insidiously flourish. As our journey into the profound insights of Hannah Arendt gently draws to a close, let us carry with us the